The palace was silent that night, the moon hovering above like a pale witness to Fazza's pain. He sat by the window, the same one from which he had once written countless love poems, but tonight, the ink in his heart felt heavy. His voice, once filled with warmth and rhythm, now trembled as he whispered into the emptiness, "I am done, fans, please pray for me." These were not words of defeat, they were words of exhaustion, of a heart that had given everything and found nothing but silence in return. The poet who once healed others with his verses was now the one in need of healing. He had carried the weight of expectations for so long, of being strong, of smiling, of never breaking. But even the kindest hearts bleed when love and loyalty are taken for granted. He had given his best to love, to friendship, to life itself, yet somehow he was left standing alone in the ruins of what once felt eternal. The public saw his smile, his grace, his kindness, but only he knew the tears hidden behind that royal composure. "I am done," he murmured again, his voice cracking like a broken prayer, "but please, don't misunderstand me. I am not weak, I am just tired of pretending to be fine." He thought back to the promises that had once felt like forever. The memories came flooding in, soft laughter, late-night talks, and love that once made him feel immortal. But love, he realized, can fade even when the heart doesn't want it to. It wasn't betrayal that broke him, it was the slow disappearance of warmth, the gradual distance that no words could bridge. He watched her walk away one last time in his mind, her shadow stretching across the sands of his heart. There were no fights, no farewells, just quiet endings that echo louder than goodbyes. Fazza had always been the poet of love, the prince of emotion, but now he felt like a stranger in his own verses. Every line he wrote turned into a wound, every word became a reflection of what he had lost. The poems that once celebrated devotion now whispered sorrow. "I am done," he wrote in his journal, "not with love, but with the pain that comes with it, not with people, but with the ones who take hearts as games." For once, he wasn't Fazza the poet, he was Hamdan, a man quietly breaking under the weight of his own tenderness. He wanted to disappear for a while, to walk into the desert where only silence existed, where no one called his name, where no camera flashed, where he could just breathe without pretending. The dunes would understand him, the shifting sands that knew what it meant to change, to lose, to rebuild. He wanted to sit beneath the stars and let them be his only witnesses. "Fans, please pray for me," he whispered again, not as a royal request, but as a human plea. He didn't want sympathy, he wanted peace, the kind that love had once promised but never kept. His soul was weary from giving too much of himself to a world that only saw the surface. People adored Fazza, the image, the poet, the prince, but few saw Hamdan, the man who cries in silence, who writes at 3 a.m. to survive his thoughts. The man who loved deeply but lost quietly. He had mastered the art of smiling through sorrow, of standing tall when the world thought he might fall. But tonight, even the strongest heart had surrendered. "I am done," he sighed, "not because I stopped loving, but because I can no longer keep breaking myself to fix what refuses to heal." He thought of his fans, the millions who found strength in his poems. He didn't want to worry them, yet he couldn't hide forever. They deserved his truth, that even the ones who inspire others sometimes need saving too. His words had carried so many through heartbreak, yet he now found himself drowning in his own. Still, he held on to faith, the quiet kind that whispers in the dark, telling him that pain is temporary and that brokenness, too, is sacred. "Please pray for me," he wrote to his fans, "not because I'm giving up, but because I'm finding my way back." There was a haunting beauty in his sadness. Even in pain, he found poetry. The tears on his face weren't weakness, they were confessions of a heart that loved sincerely. He had always said that love is meant to heal, not to destroy.
The evening returned, quiet and slow, carrying the scent of rain over the palace gardens. Fazza stood by the open doors, looking out at the world that once felt so full of meaning. The poems he had written for others now echoed back to him like whispers of his own heart. He knew his fans were worried, sending him prayers, hoping for his strength to return. And though he was still hurting, something inside him began to shift. Pain had softened him, but it hadn't destroyed him. He was learning that being done wasn't about quitting, it was about finding the courage to begin again, with wiser eyes and a gentler heart. He thought about all the love he had given, the kind that was pure, patient, and true. Even though it hadn't been returned the way he hoped, he didn't regret it. That's what made him who he was, a man who loved with depth, without conditions, without fear. He realized now that heartbreak wasn't a punishment. It was proof of his capacity to feel, to care, to give everything and still stand. He wasn't broken beyond repair, he was being refined. His silence, his sadness, his tears, they were shaping him into something even stronger than before. As night deepened, Fazza wrote again, this time slower, more deliberate. His words were no longer cries for help, they were confessions of healing. I am still here, he wrote, not because I am untouched by pain, but because I refuse to let it end my story. The poet within him was rising from the ashes, turning sorrow into art once more. Each word carried traces of his struggle, but also sparks of his endurance. He knew his fans would feel it too, the honesty, the fragility, the rebirth. Pain, after all, becomes poetry when written by a heart that refuses to quit. The stars above seemed to listen as he continued writing. He wrote not about love lost, but about self-love found. For years, he had poured his soul into others, now it was time to pour it back into himself. He realized that sometimes, the most beautiful chapter of love begins when you start treating your own heart as sacred. No longer would he chase what wasn't meant for him. Instead, he would wait for what was written in his destiny, a love that healed instead of hurt, a peace that stayed instead of faded. Fazza then closed his journal and walked into the night air. The wind that brushed his face no longer felt like a reminder of loneliness, it felt like freedom. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't waiting for anyone's return. He was waiting for himself, to return to joy, to poetry, to life. The palace around him seemed to breathe with him, alive again with quiet hope. He whispered to the moon, I'm done with pain, but not with dreams. I still believe in light. And the moon, faithful as always, seemed to shine brighter for him. Messages continued to pour in from fans around the world, messages of love, concern, faith. He read them all, and tears filled his eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. These people, whom he had never met, carried him through his darkest hours with prayers and compassion.